This episode is sponsored by Agent CRM. If you're in sales and tired of paying 3, 4, or 5 different companies for your email, CRM, funnels, phone, follow-up automation, check out Agent CRM. It's an all-in-one tool that combines all that you need to reach out, nurture, and close your clients. They've got weekly support calls so you can get up and running in no time. Get a free 14-day trial by going to the link below in the show notes. Hi everyone, this is Dan Wynn with the Intentional Entrepreneur Podcast. We have a special guest with us today. He's the managing partner at Your Best Life Now, an organization helping people elevate finances, family, fitness, and faith to maximize their best life through coaching, community, and exclusive once-in-a-lifetime experiences. His unique background of business experience, law enforcement, and martial arts training and economic analysis gives him a rare perspective that enables him to successfully guide entrepreneurs, CEOs, and other top executives to new heights. Welcome to the show, Dean Inniss.
Hey, Dan. Thank you for inviting me. And you do a common mistake that everybody does, and they run my names together, and I get Dennis a lot. And it's so funny because, Dan, if you weren't reading it, you've called me Dean for a half hour, and you go Dennis. So that's awesome. But, thank you for having me, and I'm really excited to be here today. I told you this earlier. I really want to thank you for what you do for entrepreneurs. It's amazing, and I'm glad that you're giving me the opportunity to serve your people. And my journey's a little bit different than most, I would say. I when I was younger, I stuttered, and it's going to bleed into strategic negotiations, as it were. But I stuttered, and I had real anger issues. So my dad, being in the military, said, we got to fix this. So he put me in martial arts, and I studied with a gentleman that trained special forces because he was in the military. And he used to beat my shins every time I made a mistake. And I didn't understand it at the time. But because, the first time you learn a technique, you're not going to get it the first time. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you later that to get a perfect punch takes a million punches. But I was getting my shins bashed with bamboo all the time. And it's something that wouldn't be allowed now, but probably should be. And the funny thing is, the funny thing is, 7 years later, when I started fighting, and the first guy that kicked me in my shins, and I saw the look on his face, I realized what he was really doing, and it had nothing to do with perfection of the technique. It had everything to do with building calcium deposits on my shin to protect me. And it's that way in life, right? Certain lessons in front of you, you don't learn until much later, and you go, that's why I had that. Well, he taught me martial arts, but didn't fix my stuttering. And he taught me self-discipline and how to control my anger. So that was good. But later, my dad said, what are we going to do to fix the stuttering? And so I said, I'm going to join the speech team. So I joined the speech team, and it was miserable the first 6 months. I was terrible at it and everything. And all of a sudden, I started getting more confident. And what I realized is connecting your mind to your mouth is the most important thing. And what stuttering does is it disconnects that temporarily. So you lose train of thought, and it exacerbates the stuttering. I still stutter to an extent, and really it doesn't bother me anymore because I don't let the disconnection happen. Well, I ended up getting, by my senior year, I was in the top 3 in the region in debate. And so I ended up getting a full ride debate scholarship, which taught me an enormous amount of negotiating and how to deal with certain circumstances. Because in every debate topic, you have to debate both sides equally for 4 rounds. So if you're going to be any good, and me and my partner were ranked in the top 10, if you're going to be any good, you have to learn to disconnect your emotions from your thought processes. I mean, we debated things like nuclear war, abortion, all of those emotional topics. And you learn really quickly that it's not really what's in your head that's important. It's how you persuade the person in your audience is how you win. And
Yeah.
it later became an enormous tool for me when I got into banking, because I started negotiating large contracts and negotiating with vendors. I ran the largest mortgage bank in West Texas at the end of my career for 13 years. It was a very large organization. I negotiated $150 million trade credit lines with banks, national, uh,
Mhm.
regional. And what I learned was that strategic negotiation is one of the single most important things that an entrepreneur can learn.
Mhm.
And it's so important that it really will take you from negotiating with yourself, which is the initial thing that you have to do. As an entrepreneur, you have
Mhm.
goals, you have dreams, and entrepreneurs are unique insofar as most Americans don't take that step. And entrepreneurs take that step. And when they take that step, they have to negotiate what's going to happen in their life, because initially in starting a new business, this, it's a
Mhm.
time suck, it's slavery. And so
Mhm.
in order to be successful, you have to negotiate with yourself, and that
Mhm.
being, what do I want versus what am I willing to do for it? And I believe that's why most diets fail and most of those things fail, because people don't spend time negotiating with themselves. What's the
Mhm.
long-term goal? What I'm willing to sacrifice? And what's the reward that satisfies that piece of me that likes sugar or that craves pie? And
Mhm.
people
Mhm.
don't take that step. They get on the diet, they do the diet, they have success, they get off the diet, they go back to eating the
Right.
pie and whatever. And it's the
Mhm.
same in business. Businessmen know what they want to do. Entrepreneurs know what they want to do. They know their skill set.
Mhm.
But do they make that next step and negotiate with themselves? I have to learn business as well.
Mhm.
And when you're negotiating with yourself and you come to that conclusion, then you either get education or you hire somebody, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, I coach businesses and I coach uh, starting companies and I coach billion-dollar companies. And the,
Mhm.
the one thing that's in common for all of them is at every point in their business model, they have relationships, whether they're
Mhm.
with clients, whether they're with vendors, whether they're with their employees, with their management. And so in all of those times, an amazing skill set can help them ease their life. And
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
strategic negotiations. And I teach classes in strategic negotiations all the time, because people do not know what to do. They think it's all about
Yeah.
price. They think it's all about service. And it's really not
Yeah.
about any of that. It's
Mhm.
really all about awareness and perspective.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
think when you're in a situation um, where you're negotiating, there's certain things that you can do to identify your success.
Mhm.
So that's just a little lead in. I don't know where you want me to go, where you want me to continue, but there's a lot to talk about there. And, I can talk about it from the perspective of the negotiator, and
Mhm.
that would
Mhm.
be where I would start.
Yeah.
So
So, I
go
mean,
ahead.
yeah, I mean, negotiation as a broad has obviously wider implications with not just in business and not with ourselves, but like obviously our relationships, personal relationships too. So I tell this to other you know other parties. I don't know if you have kids, but like the hardest part of negotiation is trying to get your kids to go to bed at a reasonable time or get up and eat vegetables, right? And you can probably close $150 million deals, but you can't close your kid on eating broccoli that evening. So yes, there's wider implications, but like you said, negotiation, specifically strategic negotiation, is a very valuable skill to have that spans across all your facets of personal life and your business life. And kind of before we get into the nuts and bolts of strategic negotiation, actually you shared it, so that you shared your journey, and let's kind of get in this. And you mentioned martial arts, and it reminds me of this. I don't know if Bruce Lee said it. Sounds like something Bruce Lee would say. I do not fear the man that has 1 million punches. I fear the man who has practiced one punch
A million
1 million
times.
times.
I
So
studied. It's funny you did that. You are correct. It was
mhm,
Bruce Lee,
mhm,
and I was around when Bruce Lee was around. When
mhm,
he passed away, I was 10 years old. I was
mhm,
excited about the martial arts. I actually
mhm,
studied Jeet Kune Do in his
mhm,
teachings, not in
mhm,
operations.
mhm,
But He also influenced me in negotiations because what he
Mhm,
realized down the road, he was a kung fu master,
mhm.
and his ego was out of control. And he would admit that to himself. He thought he could be anybody, anywhere,
Mhm,
anytime. And
mhm,
a monk that he heard was exceptional, he wanted to spar, and he wouldn't let him. He wouldn't let him. He wouldn't let him.
mhm,
Finally, the monk said, "Okay, it's time," and he beat him, and he beat him badly. And
mhm,
what Bruce Lee came away with was, everything that I thought I knew, I didn't know. And what the person taught him was that it's not anyone's style, it's the application
mhm,
of that knowledge with the component of
mhm,
how it relates to your physical body.
mhm, mhm,
And when you were in schools back then in the 60s and 70s, it was their way or the highway, and it was perfect and
mhm,
it was the best. But the reality, what that Bruce Lee came away with, is that no, that's not true. Everybody's
mhm,
body mechanics are different. So key
mhm,
techniques that work for me aren't going to work for you, Dan. And so
mhm,
what's going to
mhm,
happen? We're going to default to those key techniques. It's not a bad thing. It's actually a good
mhm,
thing because
mhm,
it allows you to practice that thing that you're really good at, that you get better at, that you perfect, or as close as you can. And so
mhm,
that's why he said that. But a greater piece of the learning was that you have to be aware of yourself and
mhm,
your skill sets and your talents, both in strengths and weaknesses. So you can build on those strengths,
mhm,
work on your weaknesses. But in fact, if you have them and they're inherent, which they are, I can do the split. I can kick 7 feet in the air still, but I could never do the Chinese splits. My hips were too narrow. And I
mhm,
did it. I got close and everything, but that
mhm,
wasn't my strength.
mhm,
So I
mhm,
learned how to develop the skill sets that worked on my skills. I was very fast with my
mhm,
hands, good on takedowns, good with knees and elbows and kicks, front kicks,
mhm.
side kicks, but not high Van Damme type kicks. So,
You know,
I fought for 10 years and I didn't
mhm,
lose. I won the 88
mhm,
Southwestern Championships and
mhm,
it was fun, but it really
mhm.
taught me things that were successful in business as well.
Yeah. No All Valley championships for you out of
No,
Reseda,
no
California.
All Valley championships. The ones I fought in, you got knocked out in. It was more like a boxing. You had 3 minutes and you got points.
Okay.
That was it.
All right. So, I didn't know this will turn into a Bruce Lee philosophical discussion, but a famous quote of his, like, be like water, right? And I think, how would you say that quote applies to strategic negotiations as far as for the entrepreneur negotiating deals?
Well, you know everything's in flow, and
Yeah.
water moves with flexibility, and it also takes things with it. So the first thing that you learn in strategic negotiations is it's not about you because you already know what you want.
Mm-hmm.
So get out of your skin, be
Mm-hmm.
aware that the negotiation is going to be predicated on what the person you're negotiating wants. And
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
before you ever negotiate, it's up to you to be like water and transfer the knowledge that that person has and what they want and their background
Mm-hmm.
into your intent and have that database secure. So do the
Mm-hmm.
research, learn what the other person wants, learn what
Mm-hmm.
their necessary evils are in the
Mm-hmm.
negotiation, and put yourself in a position before you ever open the negotiations to
Mm-hmm.
understanding that. And so that flow is really important because it changes with every year. We
Mm-hmm.
used to have to negotiate the deals with the bank every year, and it was a
Mm-hmm.
pain because the
Yeah.
bank get audited every year. The economy
Yep.
changes, and the auditors say,
Mm-hmm.
well, you can't do that type of loan, and you can't do that. So
Yeah.
you have to stay on top of it. So you have to know. So that requires you to get out of your skin because you already know what you want. That's the easy
Mm-hmm.
part, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just like your kids, they know they want to stay up late. They don't know why, right?
Yeah.
So teach
Yeah.
them,
Yeah.
hey, don't stay up late because if you get up early, guess what? You're going to have more energy. You can do some of the fun things that you want, and we'll work on that. And you know what? Those vegetables, if you eat them the right way with the right things, they don't taste so bad. Let's do that.
Mm-hmm.
See what the outcome is. Understand what they like, what they don't want by virtue of being water, taking in
Mm-hmm.
all the contents of others, sorting it out and picking out what they want, what they need, and how it's going to work out in your
Mm-hmm.
specific negotiation.
Yeah. I remember this Tony Robbins was saying similar, like, whoever's the most flexible is going to win in negotiations. How would you say, all these are termed non-negotiables, right? So how does being flexible and non-negotiables play off of each other, or how do they relate in especially high stakes negotiations?
Well, it's incredibly important. So
Mhm,
once you do your background work and once you
mhm,
have your research, right?
mhm,
I always
mhm,
set up a meeting, just to
mhm,
get to know the person, feel the comfort
mhm,
levels, look at the pain levels before you even do the negotiation, just to
mhm,
say hello, have a coffee, whatever. And
mhm,
the reason you do that is because things change. You can identify personality traits that you can utilize and that you can avoid. You see
mhm,
how people react to certain things. And if it's in a negative
mhm,
way, you want to make sure that that doesn't happen in your negotiation, right?
mhm,
Well, further than that is once you have all of those parameters set,
mhm,
before you ever negotiate, you do those non-negotiations
mhm,
with yourself. What's the absolute lowest I would accept? What's
mhm,
the highest that I'm going to start?
mhm,
Never vacillate from that. Do not
mhm,
make it an emotional thing. And when you're negotiating, if you get to that point where you see you're not going to get to that minimum that you're with, be willing to walk away and walk
mm,
away without emotion. The other
mm,
key, the other key is do not be the person that gets emotional and personal about the negotiation. Happens all the time because when people
mm,
don't get what they want, they get emotional. And if you
mhm,
keep
mhm,
a steady hand and you say, you know what, it's great to get to know you. I know that probably in the future we'll be able to make this work. But right now, as things sit, it doesn't work for me, and you can walk away.
mhm.
I would tell you if you maintain that level of credibility, 50% of the time you got a phone call the next day. It says, let's try and work this out again. It's
Mm,
true. Because if you're not the bad person and you just say, hey, I love what you want, I really would love to work with you, but our
mm,
circumstances give us this minimum that we have to work with, and I can't go any further below that. And that way you keep temperament, you understand perspective,
mm,
you don't challenge that person because
mhm.
something another wise man said is, the oar always changes hands. You get beat up one day and you can beat somebody up the next.
Yeah, yeah. And, you mentioned, emotions and egos, and I think sometimes there's this, people get caught up in, sunk cost fallacy, especially if they're kind of relying on this particular deal to go through. But can you elaborate how is important, like poker, right? There's the saying in poker, like check your emotions at the door, leave your emotions at the door. How important it is to have that, especially in strategic negotiations?
Well, it's incredibly important because the
Mm,
person that has the calm ultimately ends up with the credibility. So if you're
mhm,
dealing with
mm,
the head negotiator and you remain calm, first of all, they get calm from you. So
mhm,
I know that I never was in the Tony Robbins world, but I know that they talk about energy transfer, and
mhm,
it's the
mhm,
same thing in the martial arts. If you get into a fight and you lose your temper, you lose your ability to react correctly. And it's
mm,
the same in this. If you keep even tempered and know that the end result is either a yes or no when you go in, that's it. There's two ways it's going to go. You get what you want or you don't. And
mhm,
you set parameters for your success.
mhm,
Oftentimes you come in here, you got more than you'd hope for. But if you
mhm,
get to here, you have to be able to willing to walk away. And the reason why I said that so early in the
mm,
conversation is it goes
mm,
back to what you just said. It gives you the ability to know that when you hit this click, you don't have to think about it. It's automatic. We can't go below that. I wish we could do more. Maybe we
mhm,
can talk again in the future, and you leave. That leaves enormous credibility with the person you're negotiating with because you kept good level head and you had a positive attitude in a negative situation.
mm,
People think that negotiations are all about winning. They're never about winning.
mhm,
They're about both parties winning at a certain level. Very
mm,
seldom do you get everything that you ask for.
yeah,
And very seldom
mm,
do they get everything that they ask for.
yeah,
So really good negotiators know what their bottom line is and know where they're
mhm,
not going to accept anymore.
mhm,
Most of the
mhm,
time, because of that calm, they get
mhm,
more than that bottom line. And
mhm,
that's what's so important about being aware of self.
mhm,
Okay. You want to be aware of who you're negotiating with, but you want to be
mm,
aware of yourself.
mm,
Do I lose volatility in those types of situations, even when they're significant for my
mhm,
business? And I will
yeah,
tell you no, because I knew that when I'm negotiating, I always try and have a backup. That's the other
Mm,
part about strategic negotiations.
mhm,
As you're doing your research, look for other options.
mhm,
Other options also give you the ability to negotiate well.
mhm,
Okay. So
mhm,
prior to any negotiation, try and find three sources. In
mhm,
everything that I teach, when you have a business, I call it leverage. And
mhm,
you
mhm,
leverage every skill set that you have in your business, right?
mhm,
Well, you leverage every time you have a service, you leverage that service by getting three bids every year, even if you're going to stay with the same guy. And you
mhm,
let them know that you're getting three bids every year. Why? Because they know that the opportunity for them to lose the business is there. So oftentimes they sharpen their pencil because they already have a good relationship with you. They want to keep it. Oftentimes, when somebody beat that bid, I would stay with that relationship because there's
mhm,
goodwill and good faith, and that stands for something. But just knowing that that's the way I did business oftentimes saved me 10 to 15%. So that's negotiating without negotiating, which is
mm,
also strategic negotiations. By
mhm,
setting a standard operating procedure with everyone you deal with,
mm,
including the banks. I
mm.
had 5 banks that I dealt with, and they all knew it. And it was very transparent.
Mhm,
That
mhm,
transparency, just knowing that somebody wanted my business made that negotiation start on my behalf before it even got started. Just like those vendors, I don't have to
mhm,
talk to them every year. They know I'm going to get three bids every year.
mm.
If they want my business, I don't have to be there when they're already doing that.
Yeah.
That's strategic negotiations also. It's like with your
Mm,
kids. If you
mhm,
want them to go to bed early, you be preemptive. You say, "Oh
mhm,
my gosh, you did a great job at school today. If you could get to bed by 10 o'clock, I bet I could get you an extra half hour on your PlayStation tomorrow."
mm,
So you want to avoid confrontation at every level. So be
mhm,
preemptive, be aware, understand the perspective of that person that you're dealing with. You
mhm,
know your kids. We know our kids. The problem with
mm,
us is we know that they're going to give us friction, and we hate that
yeah.
friction because we love our
Mhm,
kids, we love that relationship. So avoid the friction by being
mhm,
preemptive because they're not nearly as strategic. They're more
mm,
manipulative. And that's the
mhm,
other
mhm,
problem with negotiations. If you're dealing with somebody that's manipulative, you have to
mhm,
add a different layer to your negotiation skills.
mhm.
But it's
Yeah.
all in identifying preemptive, pre-structured, standardized methodology that
Mhm.
ultimately wins with business and
You
with
know,
individuals.
yeah, and you were using those prefixes earlier, pre, right? You're kind of alluding it to it, but it seems like a lot of the work here is actually before you even
Before
sit down on the table.
90% of the work is there. And you
Mhm,
know why?
mhm,
Because then when you sit at the table, it's just check, 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 check.
mhm, mhm.
That's
Yeah,
it. That's why you can maintain a strong level of
yeah,
commitment,
yeah,
positivity, and no emotion because you
yeah.
know how it's going to go in your mind. We're either going to get there, you know their weaknesses, you know what they want, you
Mhm,
leverage what they want to get what you want.
mhm,
What
mhm.
if I can get you this? Those are things that come out in negotiations.
Yeah. What's some scripts or language that you like to use, right? As you're doing this preparation and maybe you have some pre-discovery, like what are some things is it easy as, hey, what do you want out of this? And is it as simple as is there a response as simple as I want as much money as I can get out of you as possible?
Well, look,
Huh.
obviously you don't want to say that, but
Mhm.
both parties should understand that, right?
Yeah. Mm,
So what you do in the preamble is know what they want that they haven't disclosed.
mm, okay.
That's why the research is so important because when you have that knowledge of what they really want, for me, and I'll just use this example. For me, I knew the bank had to have some loans outstanding. Okay.
Mhm,
And so I knew that they wanted to have, $200 million in outstanding. And you can pull up on their website how
mm,
much they have outstanding. And we're coming close to the end of the year. And so one of the techniques I used is, hey, I wasn't going to ask for $50 million, but what if I allowed you to lend me $50 million, how would that help you as far as meeting your goal for the year that had nothing to do with my interest rate, that had nothing to do with anything I needed? I only needed 35 million, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if they had a $50 million loan on the book, it took them from 100 to 150. That need was separate and apart from my negotiation, but was material in me getting what I wanted.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I got a 0.5 point discount,
Mm.
right? So
Yeah.
you want to meet the needs of that person. Oftentimes, those needs are not uncovered by that person directly. So you want to deal with their relationships, their
Mm-hmm.
managers, things like that. How are you guys doing? What's the number one thing that you guys are trying to accomplish this year? And those are innocent questions that surface the items that you need when you go to negotiation.
Mm-hmm. How do you deal with um, people playing hardball?
Exactly the same way I deal with everyone. You
Yeah.
remember I said I keep that even keel?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's, I really would love to deal with you, but it seems as if I am nowhere close to where you want to be. And just out of respect for your time, let's just part ways friends. I've done that so many times that people are playing hardball, let them,
Mm-hmm.
because then it's in their court. If they really want
Mm-hmm.
to do business with me, then it becomes a negotiation. If they're just playing hardball, let them play hardball because I wasn't going to get that deal anyway. And
Yeah.
that's why I said the number one component on the exit
Mm-hmm.
is knowing if you have a bottom line, if you can't get there, walk away happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not
And
happy, but walk
yeah.
away and give yourself an opportunity to do business in the future. And oftentimes those people that are hardball, oh, this is how I'm going to negotiate. I'm going to go in there and I'm like, okay, well, I can't do that. We're not willing to do that. We're not willing to do that. And I just said, I'm sorry. I didn't want to waste your time. We have certain minimums that we have to get to, and it appears that we're too far away to do anything. And before we go down a negative road, I just want to tell you thank you for your time. Thank you for your effort in meeting me. And maybe sometime down the road, we can do some business. Have a great
Mm-hmm.
day. It's not worth this because,
Mm-hmm.
look, what we're trying to do always in strategic negotiations is build long-term relationships. Those
Mm-hmm.
relationships where that vendor comes in and says, I really like doing business with Dean, and I
Mm-hmm.
know he's going to get 3 bids. What's the best we can do for Dean so we don't have to do those bids? They also knew for me that I enjoyed doing business with them. So there was some latitude. Even if I got a lower bid,
Mm-hmm.
I might go with them because I knew the product, I knew the service, and that meant a lot. And it's a
Mm-hmm.
two-way street. That's the other thing about negotiations. Like I
Yeah.
said,
Yeah.
nobody wins 100%. You come to
Yeah.
the place where you both get what you need and sometimes a little more.
And that is very distinct from the overall notion that win-win, right? So yes, everyone wins, but everyone wins at a different level.
And it depends on the circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it depends on your need.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that all is done beforehand. You know what your need
Mm-hmm.
is. So like I said, when you become a good negotiator, you're going to push that needle up.
Mm-hmm.
That's what happens. And if it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't happen the first time, it happens the second time and it happens the third
Yeah.
time. That's why
Yeah.
relationship building and strategic negotiation
Yeah.
is a constant thing. I
Yeah.
just didn't win that
Yeah.
negotiation because guess what? I'm going to have to sit against from that guy next year. He may
Yeah.
need something that I can give him that the
Mm-hmm.
following year he's going to be able to give me back.
Yeah. Yeah. How much would you say about getting good at negotiations and strategic negotiations in particular is experience, just sitting at the table, maybe even taking it on the chin a couple of times?
It's funny you brought that up because in my class when I teach it,
Mm-hmm.
I have a practice, and I
Mm-hmm.
say you practice it with everything, negotiating your car insurance, negotiating,
Mm-hmm.
with buying stuff and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And what normally happens is you're going to get put, if you're practicing all the time, in a situation where you lose. But I want you to default to the fundamentals, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you say, thank you for even listening to me. I appreciate it. Of course, I'm going to buy it at this price,
Yeah.
and people respect that. if you're not a jerk. And that's why
Mm-hmm.
I say
Mm-hmm.
negotiations is all about emotional vesting. If you're constantly positive
Mm-hmm.
in the outcome, and the outcome can be, yes, I got it, or no, I didn't, but maybe in the future. Those are both positives, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did I
Mm-hmm.
necessarily get what I want then? No, but the process brought me closer to understanding what that person need. Maybe I go back to the table with my team and my stakeholders and we decide, you know what? We really do want to do business with them. Let's lower our need. And because you left the circumstance in a good place, you can pick
Mm-hmm.
up the phone.
Mm-hmm.
Just like I expect them to pick up the phone if they
Mm-hmm.
thought, you're right, Dean, we could probably do that.
Mm-hmm. What is the wildest or most interesting deal that you've ever negotiated? Or most memorable that you can't disclose?
I can disclose this one. So a lot of these deals were emotionally invested just because of the size. So I always got more emotionally invested in it. That's why I keep talking about some of these experiences I had in banking. And one of them was a national bank was getting ready to move our local account to a national account. That never works out well for a regional entity because they don't understand your market. They don't you have to re-educate. It's problematic. Okay. However, that's what they were going to do. I said I would be willing to do that because I thought about moving that credit facility to another bank. I said I'd be willing to do that, but here are my terms. I do not want my terms changing for the next 2 years based on the economy. Of course, if interest rates change, I would allow for that. But I wanted the ease of my terms. In other words, the way we dealt business with them. I didn't want to transmute it to the national way. I wanted to keep my way. And they said, okay. And I thought that was easy. But then they called me and they said, we have 10 of our national reps coming in to visit with you about this. And so for 2 hours, I had to explain my method
Mhm.
of business, why we did things a certain way. They grilled me about the way they did it and the way I did it. And I'll tell you, my banking rep, my account executive over there, she sat there for 2 hours and I ended up winning. I got every term
Mm.
that I wanted. And she goes, that was amazing. She said, I can't believe you took every question from every one of those people and you answered it in a way that drew them back to the way you wanted to do business and why it would be good for them.
Mm.
And that's the thing, right? So that was the wildest. I mean, it was a 2 hour grilling. It was like being on trial. And I know what that's like because I was a cop. And it was worse because
Mm.
it really was important. It was an important facility for us. We did
Mhm.
like $2.2 billion in capital investment in our economy. So those
Mm.
credit facilities were huge. And,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
so, yeah, it was crazy because I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't have any prep time. So all of the things that I normally do, I couldn't do. She just said, we're going to have a meeting. All these people are going to show up. I didn't know them from Adam. I couldn't check their backgrounds, nothing. So that was the wildest thing. It came out okay. And I felt really good about it. But the thing that I came away with is whenever you're negotiating, know your stuff, your stuff. If you know everything
Mhm.
about your stuff, you're going to be okay.
Mhm. What are some parting um, thoughts that you can share with the audience about strategic negotiation that you haven't mentioned earlier?
Well, we kind of skipped across practice, right?
Mhm.
But I think that one of the things that you do is you practice with strangers, but you role
Mm.
play with your team.
Mm.
So you come up with
Mm.
objections that they would have based on your research, and you handle those objections, especially for people that are just starting in the road of the strategic negotiations as
Mhm.
it grows more and more important in their business. It's really important to practice because,
Mhm.
look, like me, I used to stutter. I got better at stuttering because of
Hmm.
practice, because of discipline. And it's the same with negotiations. When
Hmm.
you practice, you get better. You're not
Hmm.
taken off guard. And then
Hmm.
know your strengths before you go in there and how they relate to that particular situation and be able to articulate them. So have somebody come up with a list of questions or a list of challenges because in the negotiation sometimes it's challenges. And they can be
Hmm.
polite, but they're still challenges. It's
Hmm.
how do I know that you're going to be in business next year? Your
Hmm.
sales trends are down,
Yeah.
and those
Yeah.
questions can be disarming if you're not prepared for them. If you're prepared for them and say, yes, they were down, and this is why. We had two things change in our market. We had this company leave, but we have since come up with the game plan to garner more business. Whatever your
Mm.
answer is going to be, but have answers for those telling questions that are going to come. Rehearse it and
Mm.
rehearse it a couple of times from different
Mm.
angles. And then you'll
Mm.
feel better about it when it comes to fruition. Most of the
Yeah.
time, the negotiation is not near as tough as the role play. And that's
Yeah.
what you're
Yeah.
looking for. So I would say
Yeah.
that. And then I would default back to the two most important things: awareness and
Mm.
awareness of your circumstance, awareness of their circumstance, what they need, and how the two can play together on the same playground.
Hmm.
The other thing is perspective. Be aware of their perspective and what they're trying to get so that if you have something you can offer them that will make the negotiation better, that changes their perspective, gives them more leniency, more opportunity to want to meet your expectations.
Yeah. And as we wrap this up, you talk about practicing, role playing, and even everyday parts of your life, right? Kids buying something at the store. Um, are you kind of the philosophy that everything is negotiable?
Um, at 60, I pick my negotiations more succinctly, but
Mhm.
to start with, I do believe everything's negotiable. But I'm also of the opinion that when you find somebody who doesn't want to negotiate and it's fair,
Mm.
stop. You owe
Mm.
yourself that. I mean, you're
Mm.
practicing not to be a pain, but to get
Yeah.
better at a skill set. So you don't want to disrespect the person you're speaking to. And
Yeah.
also remember this, Dan, I think it's important to know that certain people can't negotiate.
Mm.
You go to a clerk, they don't have the ability to negotiate. So don't
Mm.
put them through an exercise where they don't have that decision-making power. So
Mhm.
ultimately, I guess the advice that I would use is if you're going to negotiate with somebody, make sure it's with the decision maker.
Hey, we're here with Dean Inniss, dropping so much valuable information on strategic negotiation. I think this information is valuable to much anyone who listens to it, but especially to all the business owners and entrepreneurs out there. Hey, if we want to connect with you, what's the best way?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn for Dean Inniss,
Mm-hmm.
Facebook, Dean Inniss, Instagram at DJ_crusade. Because I have crusades in my life. And
Mm-hmm.
then my company, one of my companies is www.yblnow.com. And that's a good place to see what my company does and, the faith, fitness, and family and
Mm-hmm.
finance, and how we have executive training at a very high level and coaching in those
Mm-hmm.
four facets of life. So you can reach me anywhere in there.
All right, we'll put those links in the show notes. And real quick, because you mentioned it before about your new strategic negotiators training, can you give us a sneak peek about what you guys do a little bit more there?
Well, what I do is I run a small class. It's like it's a one-on-one, or it's a 45-minute class that I go through all of the steps that you want to be prepared for. It's
Mm-hmm.
pretty simple, but it's articulate, and if you use
Mm-hmm.
that in all of your negotiations, it works out really well. As a matter of fact, you know what, Dan? I would love to drop that slide deck, and you can share it with your
Yeah.
people, and that would be wonderful. And
Perfect. We'll do that.
yeah, so I
Yeah.
can send that to you later
Mm.
today, and if you want to
Mm.
drop that with this information, I'm more than happy to share that.
Thank you so much for your generosity.
You bet, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
said, I
So
appreciate what you do for people, and I do it on a much smaller level, so I appreciate you allowing me to share my ideas with your audience.
I'm glad we can collaborate on this together. And hey, so we're at the end. The last part of our show is the hot seat rapid fire questions about being a entrepreneur. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So who you look up to?
I looked up to my dad. And my dad had his own business. He started in the military. He went through college, first one in his family to go to college. He was a city county planner, and he stepped up to become his own entrepreneur, opening an architecture planning business. That was pretty successful up until he got cancer and passed away at a very early age.
Hmm.
But yeah, I looked up to my dad because of work ethic, how he went about it, and the discipline that he brought to my life that changed everything.
What's the best business advice you've ever received?
The best business advice I ever received was build good relationships. But the best
Mm,
advice I tell people now is start your business as if you're going to leave it. And
mm,
that doesn't mean that you're going to leave it. But if you
mhm.
build a business to exit it at some point, it's going to have better strategic planning. It's going to have standard operating procedures. It's going to have job descriptions and all of those things that lead you to have a successful business and a business that's more valuable so that you can have the choice of whether you sell it or keep it as passive income because it runs itself.
I subscribe completely to that philosophy, and that's
That's the
what I tell
best advice to any business, starting
everybody.
business.
Yep. What's your most favorite business book that you've ever read?
Um, I would say Napoleon Hill. I think that
Mhm,
was one of the best ones. I also read The Secret, and
mhm,
that's a pretty good book. Um, and then, what I found is, and I don't know if you subscribe to this, but there's about 6 or 7 success techniques,
mm,
and they're dressed up a lot of different ways. But now I know that as a strategist and coach, my job is to teach those 7 techniques in a way that the student can absorb them. Because really, that's what the
mhm,
different books are. They're
mhm,
different ways of teaching the same thing in a different narrative. And
mhm.
so I subscribe to reading a lot of books, but I also subscribe to identifying people in your life that have a skill set that you
Oh,
like. Take
mm,
that skill set. You don't have to be them, but take that
mm.
skill set and add it to yourself.
Are you familiar with the term 3 feet from gold?
No.
Okay, so it's kind of a short uh parable or story. So the story goes, mining prospector, obviously he hears about gold in the hills, goes by the land, buys the equipment, digs, doesn't hit any gold. Finally, he sells it to the next guy. The next guy only digs 3 feet and hits a bunch of gold. So how do you know as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, when to pivot or when you might be just 3 feet from gold?
Well, we talked about a couple of the things that would go into that decision already. We talked about the water and the flow. We talked about awareness and perspective. And I think that what ultimately happens to be to give up 3 feet from gold is the number one thing is faith, right?
Mm,
If everything in your life gave you that faith to start, then why stop 3 feet away? And if you're worried about never hitting it, then you better re-examine your choice to begin with. That would be
mhm,
the only
mhm,
reason to walk away. So faith and perspective, understanding that not everybody hits it the first time,
mhm,
and most of the people that win are the people
mhm,
that just keep getting up in life.
mhm,
And the
mhm,
reason that everybody has a dream, but most people don't execute it is
mm,
because they don't start and they don't have the drive to fail, fail, fail until they succeed.
mm. What's the best thing you spent $100 or less on recently that has improved your personal life or your business life?
Wow, these are good questions. Um, uh, you know what I would say? Okay, you're gonna laugh. A pull-up bar, and
I believe it. Yeah.
it was $20, and I'll tell you why. Throughout my fighting career, I've done damage to myself, my
Mhm,
shoulders, my back, and everything. And so I bought this pull-up bar so that I can execute on all the things that I teach everybody else, because I believe that you have to lead by example. If you're going to be a
Mm-hmm.
good coach, you better either have done it or willing to do it, period. And if they're not
Mm-hmm.
going to do that, then you probably don't want to be coaching with them. So I have the pull-up bar and I put it up there. And every time I go by it, I try and do more pull-ups. And I remember when I turned 56, I did the Tough Mudder and I was doing 40 pull-ups then. So the best thing that I did was buy that. It's changing me focus wise, because now I know, hey, I can do this stuff. I can reinvent myself at 60. I can do this. And it's because of some other people in my life recently that I have that reinforcement of vigor.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the other thing that I would always say is, you buy a microphone, and this was over $100, but let's say it was $100. It's not the microphone that changed my life. It's the microphone I got so that I could do podcasts with people like you that changed
Mm-hmm.
my life.
Mm-hmm.
This was
Yeah.
free. This was not. It gave me the
Mm-hmm.
ability to do that. So those are two examples of things that can change your life in ways that you don't even think.
Yeah. Thank you. What's the biggest challenge in your business today?
Competition, and I think
Mm.
most people will say that. In this space of executive coaching, everybody wants to be a coach. I don't even like
Mm-hmm.
calling myself that,
Mm-hmm.
because you can get a certification to be a business life coach, and next
Mm-hmm.
thing you know, you got an online program and you're charging people money for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so. That's our number one thing, and we love
Mm-hmm.
competition. It drives innovation with us. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the number one challenge we have in business.
Speaking of competition, if you were to advise someone that wants to go into business on their own, would you say go into a place where there's quote unquote competition because that may indicate that there's people paying for it, or would you subscribe to the philosophy where pioneers get arrows in their backs?
uh, Funny you should say that.
Mm,
I opened an energy renewal company in Fort
mm,
Collins, and yeah, there's a little bit of that. And I'm opening a
mm,
biohacking franchise in Austin,
mhm,
Texas, and there's a
mm.
little bit of that. But I will tell you that it's a combination of both.
Mm,
I think that my career was more based on the fact that I was a terrific mechanic. I understood
mm,
business. I understood where weaknesses were. I could maximize utility. And so I could
mhm,
become an entrepreneur because I knew how to run businesses. And then I gained the skill sets that I'm marketing now.
mhm,
But
mhm,
but I think that if you go into a space where there's a lot of competition and you see innovation and you see the ability to garner market share, that's where I'd go, because
mm,
it's the quickest way to success. If you
mhm,
do something better than your competition and you can do it at a competitive price and you can market that, you're going to get quick success. As a
mhm,
pioneer, it's a little more difficult because you're fighting inherency, which is a
mhm,
terrible
mhm,
thing. People are
mm,
at this level, and if you have something that really changes the mindset, it's hard to get past that.
mhm, mhm,
If it's a step type innovation, go for that.
mhm.
If you can change something in a way that makes it so much better that people are already using, success.
Hey, the last question is you lose everything in your business, and the only thing you have is your laptop, your cell phone, and an internet connection. How do you rebuild your business in 30 days?
The first thing I do is that's where relationships are key. You rebuild the relationship if you lost it. You start connecting with people, and you are very good at articulating simply what the benefit of doing business with you is as compared to the market around you. And
Mm,
with the internet and with the phone, that market can be global. I have a client that's in skincare, and she's doing incredibly well. But I asked her, she goes, "Well, the economy's bad." And I said, "But what is your market share?" And we did her market share. It's like 0.0001. I said, "Do you know how much upswing you could do in 6 months?" And she goes, "I have no idea." She's up 136% in her business
mm,
in 6 months because she changed her mindset, realizing what's the market share.
mhm,
There's a ton of market share. And you know what? she uses the internet.
Mhm. Thank you, Dean, for hanging out with us. So much great information and so much insight. We've got your contact information. We'll put it in the show notes, and hopefully we can talk again soon.
Dan, thank you for all your wisdom, and thank you for sharing your stage with me.
My pleasure.